You're live.
Welcome to Project Sanity. I'm hosting today, standing in for Brandon. I almost want to say welcome to the Takedown, but no, this is not the Takedown. This is Project Sanity. I'm Nick, the host of the Takedown, sitting in for Brandon today. I'm not going to take much time to do our introductions. I want to remind everybody to take the time to like and subscribe to the Takedown. Oh, excuse me. I meant to say like and subscribe to Project Sanity. But while you're down there subscribing to Project Sanity, there's
Buddy,
another show right next to it,
Yeah.
Takedown. You can subscribe to that as well. We can get all that in there, right?
I
But
would have
today we're
been
going to talk politics, and I had a whole nother topic that I wanted to talk about today. But right before we went in, looks like we're going to talk about Donald Trump, and we're going to segue. But the title of today's show is Democrats Are Not the Leaders We Need. And then I was also going to possibly talk about the Justice Democrats if we have enough time near the end here. So let's get started. Okay. We on the left, a lot of times we want to look to people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders to be like some sort of, lightning rods or people that people can rally around and they're doing all these awesome things. You know, I want to kind of push back on that. I think that's the wrong place to be, especially with these particular individuals. And the reason I say that is, Bernie Sanders during the campaign, in America, Bernie Sanders seems like this great bastion of left wing thought. He's exactly what we need. But, in reality, Bernie Sanders is, a hardcore centrist, very, very centrist. And he still is not exactly where, we really need him to be in terms of trying to transform something. His whole framework is trying to work within the system as it is. And the system as it is completely broken. It's never going to deliver anything that we really, really need to have delivered in that method. We need to have something more towards a radical transformation. So, with that in mind, we have to say, when Bernie Sanders goes on, I think his best vote on national security issues or military spending, I think his best vote was voting no on the Iraq War. And I know he highlighted that in the campaign, but that was his best vote. When you start looking at defense spending bills and things of that nature, he was down for every weapon system, for every spending expansion. He was down for the NDAA. Elizabeth Warren, she was also down for the NDAA and the CISA. I don't know if Bernie Sanders was down for the CISA. They were pretty much down with the establishment as far as foreign policy and military spending was concerned, and that's problematic because they're supposed to be this bastion of left wing leadership or progressivism and all that, and they really can't even get down to the basics of trying to at least freeze the military spending, trying to at least restore or protect Americans' privacy rights. That's I mean, to be honest with you, that's problematic, and it's hugely problematic enough to me to where I say these people really aren't people we should be looking to for leadership. They're really more like people that after we've already won the fight that needs to be fought, they'll be along for the ride because they know which way the wind is blowing. They're like the first among that group. To me, what do you think about that, Richard or David?
I'm just over here trying to get some things set up in the background. I wasn't prepared either for David to be joining us, but we were having a great conversation. I think you have a lot to say, but give me a moment. I'll get David back up here as well to talk about.
Well, David, even if you're not up, the viewers can hear you though, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think
Yeah. Well,
they probably could hear me screaming, tackling over you when you did your nice little promotion at the beginning there. Hey, everybody. I don't repeat your question.
my question was, basically that whole long thing I had about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren with the problematic national security and foreign policy votes. I'm basically saying, these people really aren't the bastions of liberalism or excuse me, or progressivism that people would lead you to believe. And I think that they're really more along the lines of after the real movement has already won the fight, they can be depended on for, some reliable votes here and there, but they're not at the forefront.
Yeah. I think that. Oh, I'm Nick Nowlin today.
I got you.
No worries. No, I think that You're right. I think that Bernie does represent a decent amount of progressivism, but I'm sometimes I question why, where he really falls. There's things you say officially on the record, and then there's the views that you don't necessarily think are ready for mainstream just yet. And for all his radicalism, sometimes I wonder.
Radicalism? What radicalism?
I meant to put it like that. I just didn't actually do that, so my bad. But for all of his radicalism,
Oh, okay, you put the quotes up there. I just want everybody to know, in case you couldn't see David, he did the air quotes. So that was let everybody know he's being facetious.
Sometimes I wonder. Back in the day, he really did bash the Democrats. So it just makes one wonder what his real views are on the two-party system, and what changed, and it wasn't, for all the people pissed off about the money or how our revolution was set up or how he handled the primaries. I still think Bernie's Bernie. I just don't. So sometimes I really question the underlying strategy.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit. I was primarily angry, about him not challenging a lot of these. He didn't really challenge the election fraud that went on in the primary. He was okay with them basically cheating him out of multiple states and cheating him out of tons and tons of delegates. And he really didn't fight on that behalf. Like, we sent them a lot of money. And I think, moving forward, any type of champion that we're going to donate to again, we need to have them on record saying, look, I am going to challenge every state that's close. I'm going to challenge any state that has any type of suspicious activity going on. That's what you pay me for, because I'm actually protecting your voice. That is something I actually expect from a leader that I'm going to support. So I'm not going to be supporting anybody that believes in the system as it stands right now to count the vote fairly. I expect there to be a contentious legal battle for any progressive candidate moving forward. That needs to actually be a part of their platform.
Yeah.
I think that was really one of Bernie's failures in terms of a test of leadership. I always say this about Bernie Sanders. I think he's failed multiple tests of leadership, and I think that's one of them. Not challenging, the primary, what happened to him.
And I think that goes back to the question of strategy and, what the end game is. I would say was, because the expectation was obviously that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. Not our expectation per se, the expectation in that universe, that microcosm. But now it's a matter of what the end game is. Now that Bernie definitely has come out at the forefront, at least mainstream, and I don't think the strategy is all that clear just yet. I know that it definitely looks like he's basically putting the weight onto in taking over the Democratic Party, and I would agree with a lot of the skepticism about the success, about the potential success of that. Every day I see it happening less and less. What I will add into the mix here before I hand it back to you is, and we were talking about this before we went live, Chelsea Manning actually wrote her first column today for The Guardian, and one thing she said was, and I think it's a really good point, we need leaders, specifically in this case, and her point was progressive leaders. We need leaders that aren't going to bend, that are going to stand up and fight for the values that we believe in. And her basic point was, if you look at Obama, his entire legacy was built up on things that are not set in stone. They can be pared down for the most part.
Okay, so we'll come back to Chelsea Manning's statement.
I only mention that because we're talking leadership, and so it sort of all goes hand in hand.
Yes, I do agree, but let's bring it back. You said you wonder about the strategy. Like, in my estimation, as of right now, moving out of the primary, he didn't challenge those fraudulent election results. Then he kisses Hillary Clinton's ring and gets nothing for it. Then he gets blamed for a lot. And now he's out there letting them use his name to be the brand of the party when they are 100% against everything that he stands for and supposedly is pushing as a policy agenda. What kind of strategy is that? I mean, I guess you said it looks amorphous, but to me, it looks ineffective.
I don't think this is what.
Let me ask you a different question. What does an insurgency look like? What does an insurgency look like in terms of, trying to be an insurgent inside the Democratic Party? What does that look like? If we were to try to attempt that, is that something where we're supposed to hold hands and get along? And, everybody don't want to rock the boat?
That's not what you're seeing in California, or California would be a successful example. Florida would be a failing example. That's not what you're seeing in certain states, and politics is local. So if you're looking at it from a national level, if you're just looking at Bernie Sanders, you're not really focusing on a possible insurgency. You do have to look at the local level, and I don't think it's whether or not it will succeed. I don't think it's been given enough time to actually evaluate that, to actually take a look at it.
Well, I will say that the strategy of taking over the Democratic Party is not a new one. It's been one that's been going on for well over 60 years. So at this point,
I'm saying this attempt. I'm not
this attempt.
It's not a new.
Yeah. And look. I'm saying I'm sure the people that are doing this, are good people. I'm sure they're good people, but yeah, no, I don't think that they're much better than the people that tried and failed before them. So anyway. To say that all politics is local is one thing. Maybe in some regard that may or may not be true. I'm not sure kind of where I fall on that, because I believe most of the time the local politics, at the lowest level, they still have to operate within the rules set by the level above them, and so on and so on and so on. So an insurgency really can't start from one place or another. It really has to begin everywhere all at once. So, winning the local level, but still living under the state and national levels rules that are not progressive, it really doesn't really win very much. It's the last rung of the ladder, and it's important. But at the same time, they're just operating within the rules set by the levels above them. So I think, in terms of an insurgency, you have to attack all levels and take all levels, nearly simultaneously for it to be a real transition. But here's what I was going to say. An insurgency is not going to be people, holding hands and getting along and being afraid of embarrassing somebody. To be honest with you, the better ideas, the best candidates, they're going to be forged in the fires of battle. They're going to have to get out there and fight it out. And then may the best man win. If we lose by that, that's fine. We'll come back and get them next time. And if somebody, goes into a primary or something like that, and they're so damaged by the truth that they can't win an election, they don't deserve to be in there. That's what it is. That party, the party has to get along and all that. That stuff has to go. The strong will survive. That's what you have to have this kind of insurgency. And it's going to be dirty. It's going to be ugly. And civility has no place here, because guess what? People's lives are on the line. And somebody else told me that, you can't not like this because, this affects people's lives and all that. When it affects people's lives, you can't put people's lives on the line just so you can be civil with somebody that's 100% not representing those lives that are going to be lost. That's perfectly okay sacrificing those people. You can't be civil with these people. For what? Because you got a D next to your name? This is crazy. It actually boggles my mind that that's the kind of tact people take. Well, you have to get along with people. No, you don't. If they don't want you in the club, just leave.
There was recently a tweet going around, I can't remember from who was attributed to her, but the theory was that basically Democrats are still playing they were playing a game with Republicans, and Republicans said they're done, set the house on fire, and Democrats are still inside the house trying to win the game.
Okay, so now let's transition it, right? So now we're talking about the Democrats versus the Republicans. But before that, I don't know if people watch Star Trek or not, but we were talking about what kind of leaders we need. We need a leader. I don't know if people like Star Trek or not, but Captain Kirk, James Tiberius Kirk, that's kind of, you take him and you mix him with maybe like a Jean-Luc Picard, kind of put them together. So you might not have the charisma of Kirk where everybody follows him because he's a funny guy, he's a charismatic guy, and he's kind of lucky and he takes chances. You might not need necessarily the charisma, but you do need the courage to take chances. But then at the same time, you also need somebody who has like, who commands respect, right? At the same time, and listen to their supporters. And there's like a really strong relationship between the leaders, people that lead, and the people that they lead. And that's what Jean-Luc Picard really excels at. He's considered the counselor. He hears everybody out. He makes a decision. And a lot of times, because they have respect for him and they understand he respects them, he's going to fight for them. It's a really, really strong unit that they can build. We need something kind of like a mix of that. Somebody that's going to take chances and be bold and courageous, but at the same time command respect and respect the people that follow them, and understand that the leader has responsibility to the followers.
Yeah,
I think that's really what we kind of need. A bad example would be like a Captain Janeway. You don't want that. That's not what we need. We don't need anybody to say, I know everything, I'm going to handle all this, y'all just do what I say. We don't need anything like that. We need kind of more towards what I said at first.
Yeah, I don't think we can get away from having a charismatic leader. I think if you put Bernie Sanders with Obama's swagger, we end up with President Bernie Sanders instead of Hillary Clinton. Just even with the same policies, as inadequate as I agree that they are, I think Bernie is too centrist for the radical progressive movement that we're after. Although he is the most radical one of the most radical progressives that's in any sort of position of power when it comes to the Senate.
Well, again, though, that's because in America, the fight has gone too long. The right has won for so long that it's moved that way. But that doesn't mean you can't have a shining beacon. Just be out there in the darkness by yourself, and people will gather towards the light. That doesn't mean that can't happen.
But it does mean that there are realities on the ground in which that when it comes to where the rubber meets the road, that if you don't have people that at least lean your way in those positions that you've allowed to get there and accepted them as acceptable in that position, then you end up with even less than the little that you're getting. So,
well, actually, I disagree with that. I think
there would be less opposition to Trump's nominees if there weren't people like Bernie Sanders in there, even if they're going to approve some and so, or whatever it may be, whatever the particular legislation will be. But go ahead and disagree.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with that. Number one is reach for the stars. There's none of this bullshit about, well, blah, 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 blah. You got to accept what it is. The problem is what is out there right now is shit. And unless we build something radically different, trying to play within that, you're already going to lose. You can say facts on the ground or nothing. Look, there's no reason why you can't radically change the dynamic of the land. Or excuse me, I'm stuttering, but you can't radically change the landscape. There's no reason why you can't do it. You just have to have the will to do it and the backbone to do it.
Yeah,
and get out there and do it.
Essentially, part of why that backbone is necessary is because there are real consequences to if you don't succeed. If you don't succeed and you lose somebody like a Bernie Sanders in the position that he's in, then you get a less effective movement than you would if you keep that less than acceptable person in that position.
See, I don't even agree with. I still can't even agree with that. I don't think Bernie Sanders has been effective in the position that he's in, other than speaking. Like anybody,
I'm not arguing that he's the most effective. I'm saying what I'm suggesting to you is that let's just say, for instance, you have a group of people and half of them want to give you 0 and half of them want to give you 1, and then there's one person that's arguing for 5. Having that person in there arguing for 5, even if he doesn't get you any more than 1, reduces the likelihood of you ending up with getting 0. And so, like, whether they win an individual fight or not, having somebody that tends more your way than the crowd is better than not having somebody there. Then that's not to say that you accept that as acceptable. It just means that if you want to change that there are real potential consequences to losing that. Now what I think what you're suggesting is that it's so bad that it's worth it, and I'm inclined to agree with you. But we can't pretend that there aren't consequences to reaching for the stars and failing.
Okay, so what I would say is, ultimately, where we are is unacceptable, and we have to move. So if populism isn't, and this is what I was gonna transition into this, but all around the world, everything is shaken up. Everything is changing. Everything's in flux. People are rejecting the current status. You have to provide a way forward that's not anything like what is already here. You have to provide something that's radically different. If you don't provide it on the left, you're going to get it on the right. And I mean, you can, and this has parallels throughout history. You know, the power structure is very good at crushing left-wing movements. You know, they're very good at crushing left-wing movements. And one of the enemies of left-wing movements is wanting to compromise and be centrist and all that. Look, you got to reach for the stars, and sometimes you will lose. But guess what? That is the nature of the beast. When you lose, there's always opportunity to come back and win it. You know, so the fact that, you know, the idea that you can't fight for anything because you may lose, you know, that's a loser mentality. You know, I'm not gonna lie to you. If you don't fight, you're guaranteed to lose, guaranteed. And to be honest with you, you know, trying to take it the centrist route, you know, you're gonna lose anyway, because that's what we've been doing for the last 35 years. We've been trying to take this centrist route and try to splice it down the middle and, you know, try to be a little bit more effective than the Republicans. And that shit doesn't do anything. You know, we're going to actually shift into something else, and then we're going to come back. We're going to bring it full circle. But if you want to resist the right, you have to resist them with the right policies. You cannot beat them by doubling down on shitty policy. You can't say, well, this stuff sucks right now, but the Republicans will make it a lot worse. They're offering change. And people know what's working, what's right now. What we have now right now is unacceptable. So they're going to take that chance at change, even if it's leading us further in the wrong direction. And the reason why that was possible was because you offered to stay where we are, and somebody else offered change. And where we are is shit. You need to move it to the left. And that means reaching for the stars. Now, I'm not expecting Bernie Sanders to come up tomorrow and say, hey, we need to abolish private ownership of land. I'm not expecting that. But what I am expecting this fool to say is, hey, you know, the United States has not been a very good actor in the world scene. And, you know, we've caused a lot more damage than we've actually, you know, we've caused a lot more damage than we like to let on. And we probably need to, you know, scale back, you know, how we do our intervention, or radically change how we interact with the rest of the world. That is like his job, just to even have that out there. And you could say, well, you know, the public's not ready for that yet. But we need the public to even understand that such political thought is even possible. Like, when I talk to people that aren't really deep into politics, when I say that Bernie Sanders is centrist, they look at me like I'm crazy, because they don't even know that there is a spectrum beyond Bernie Sanders. They're looking at him, this centrist, which is not what we need to handle the problems that we have right now. They're looking at him like he's a beacon of the left. And they say, well, that's just, you know, that's just crazy. This dude's a centrist, and they're calling him crazy. That's how bad a situation we're in right now. We need to go beyond, far beyond that. But back to leadership.
I was just going to jump in and mention that, like, the people need to be prepared for the consequences. And not to say that Bernie voters or anything like that are the reason for Trump or anything, but that is the type of a situation that you get, where is instead of a Hillary Clinton who is going to continue the problematic policies that are shit, as you say, and I agree, that we're getting even worse policies, half-brained, and like potentially with you know, much longer consequences than a Trump term. And so I agree that those are the types of things that we're going to have to confront and challenge. But you're going to get resistance from people who are scared of that and the idea of losing. So they're going to want more security in the idea that reaching for the stars, that bringing good policy can win. And so,
okay, let me respond to that. Right now, we've been compromising, and we've been losing. You know, I think what is the bad part of that premise is that the expectation that if we don't compromise, that we'll just continue losing. No. The way the political system works, it affords opportunity. When you have a situation where, how can I say this? When you have a situation where we are is bad, but people don't want to leave where we are, like, you just have to have courage. Like, people respect strength. They're drawn to strength. And that's what the left just needs to have. They just need to have strength of their convictions, and they need to be bold. And, you know, somebody said, you know, what are you going to do? Not compromise for 100 years? It won't take 100 years. All we need to do is shift the window, and you do that by not compromising. And then the political opportunity will arise, and you take advantage of it, and you move the pendulum in your direction. That's how it works. The right does it all the time. But no. The left, we have to compromise. We have to compromise and keep moving to the right. No, you don't. You have to draw the line in the sand and say, we're not going anywhere. We're going this way. And again, I'm not saying you can't compromise at all. What I'm saying is we've compromised so far and so much that somebody like Bernie Sanders looks like a bastion of the left. Now, there's another comment here that says somebody that criticizes Israel. Bernie Sanders didn't criticize Israel. That's not what he did. Bernie Sanders acknowledged that Palestinians deserve rights. He didn't criticize Israel. That's not criticizing Israel, by the way, just so you know. Acknowledging that Palestinians have rights is not criticizing Israel. Criticizing Israel is what I'm going to do right here. These settlements are illegal. They are stealing the Palestinians' lands. They are putting in place an apartheid state and doing a land grab. And you know what? The reason why Israel won't give up that stuff is because that's where they're stealing 20% of the Palestinian water. That's where Israel gets its water from, the Gaza Strip. It gets 25% of its water from there. They're never going to give up that land because they need that water source. But you don't hear Bernie Sanders saying that because that's a real critique of Israel. What Bernie said was, I'm trying to keep even-handed. See, once again, the shifted window is so far to the right that somebody that's trying to be even-handed, even though they shouldn't be, one person's clearly in the wrong, there should be no even-handedness deserved there. He looks like he's criticizing Israel.
Yeah, I think one thing that gets a bit lost in the idea of the compromise and the left versus the right and so on and so forth is healthcare is a great example. There's been recent polling from Pew that showed that not just or a majority of Americans support a government, basically a Medicare for all type option. A majority, 58%. So it's not a compromise between and that includes 40% of Republicans. So when we're talking about compromising, we're not just talking about compromising between the left and the right more generically, but we're talking about the corporate representatives that are our senators and members of the House, them compromising with each other for their mega donors and leaving us, and basically just trying to sell it to us. So it's not so much just that our leaders need to stop compromising. We need to stop compromising with our leaders about that they're not even representing us on either side of the aisle. Right?
Okay. So I'm going to take a second. I'm going to respond, one last time to the chat here, just because I'm feeling like I need to be interactive. But the fact that I have to explain that Bernie Sanders is a centrist, when that's, if you really study like politics around the world and actually examine his positions, that's what he is. That's a problem. I'm not going to force feed you. If you want to believe that he's a bastion of progressivism, more power to you. But I would tell you, in America, he only looks that way because your political spectrum is not very worldly. It's centralized in America. So please take some time and just go examine the politics of like Europe or something like that, and then tell me that Bernie Sanders is not a centrist. Now, I'm not saying he's the same as Barack Obama, because I don't call Barack Obama a centrist. I don't call Hillary Clinton a centrist. I call those right wingers. They are well in the right. So just throwing that out there.
So when you refer to the left and the right in that sense, it's from a global perspective as opposed to an Americentric.
Yes. I'm not. My spectrum is not the same as America's. That's the American spectrum is just completely fucked up. You can't use that as some kind of reference. Like your readings are going to be off. Yeah, well, just being honest with you.
Americentrism is at the center of a lot of the problems that we have when it comes to informing our populace about what's really possible, as Bernie Sanders in particular, when he does refer to the global perspective, that we're the only first world country basically that doesn't have healthcare as a guaranteed right. Whether the quality of the healthcare is a separate question, but the concept that you should have access to healthcare and not just an emergency room by nature of existing or by being a citizen of the country, at least at minimum.
Yeah. I mean, foreign policy is probably that's a dark spot on America. Like I can't even get up here and really have a dialogue with people because I have to like unteach. I feel like I have to unteach all of the bullshit that people have just ingested. As far as they're telling me stuff like not even the other Arab states acknowledge Palestine. It's like, well, how can they? Israel's got the United States standing behind them. And the United States has a lot of power and pull. I remember it was in the news that a resolution actually made it against Israel in their settlement building. I'm like, well, the General Assembly has passed several resolutions about that. They all get vetoed by the United States. that's the kind of power you have with the United States standing behind you. You can just do crazy shit and nobody can say anything about it because, the United States sits on the Security Council, got a permanent seat, and we got a veto, and they can single-handedly do whatever they want, as far as the UN is concerned. So I'm going to get off of that because, it actually irritates me a lot that I have to kind of go through that with people because that's just so crazy, right? But I just want to show you guys that I see you guys there commenting, and when something comes up, I do want to comment on it. But we're talking about leadership, right? Let's look at Donald Trump. As fumbling and bumbling as he is, I do believe Donald Trump is showing us something about leadership. And I know that's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. Nobody wants to see anything good about Donald Trump, but this guy kind of just does what he wants. Like, he has a vision in his head. He has some sort of objective, bad or for worse, but he just goes in there and does it. And now contrast this with Barack Obama. Millions upon millions of people came out in droves to vote for this man. Record high turnout. The wind at his back. I mean, his party had 2 houses of Congress. He had majorities, super majorities. And he just couldn't do nothing. He couldn't get anything done. He was just so weak and powerful. America's, it's a big ship and you just can't turn it. Trump was making moves before he was even president. That is just the difference between the personalities of the people that were in the presidency. And I'm sorry, but that's just a huge difference. And I think we need to recognize that maybe our leaders need to be strong-minded and have strong objectives and go ahead and roll through.
Yeah, I think it's. I was just taking a look at the chat as well, but it's. I think it's difficult for a lot of folks to really deal with the idea that Trump is being successful, even if what he's doing is detrimental in a variety of ways, and possibly even to his own at least stated goals. The Mexican wall, or the wall between us and Mexico, and how he's going to pay for it is a great example, where. And there's people floating, I guess it's been speculated as trial balloons, basically of ideas of how to pay for it, and he basically poll tests it in the public, sends some poor sap out there to say that that's what they're doing, and then when that gets ripped all to shreds, then it's like, oh, the media misreported it, and that was just an idea, and here's what we're actually going to do, and floats another idea, hoping this one works. But he's also he's able to sell what's mostly ineffectual or stuff that everybody agreed on in the first place as an accomplishment for him. We saw with some of the early deals with the businesses about how he was basically taking credit for things that were largely done by the workers' unions or were going to transpire in various ways, like taking credit for the carrier jobs that were going to stay in the country anyway and adding that to his number of jobs that he saved. And he just does this. And for instance, the wall is another great example. The wall he's building the same wall that Hillary Clinton wanted to build, and that they essentially were starting in 2006 when 25 Democrats joined Republicans in voting for the act that they passed, and where they increased funding, increased more wall building, and increased Border Patrol agents, and did basically everything that Obama then went and continued, and that Trump is going to basically just continue to expand.
Okay, so I agree with what you just said here. I'm going to respond to the chat here again, and I know I'm derailing the show by doing this, but number one, guys, is extrajudicial killings a global leftist policy? Bernie Sanders was sure down with that. Is that a global leftist policy? It's not necessarily his domestic policy that makes him a centrist, guys. It's the foreign policy that everybody seems to ignore in America. And when you say things like, well, scholars agree. Scholars agreed that black people were inferior to whites too. Were they right then? No, they weren't. And that's why just saying, just because scholars agree means they're right. No, that's not what that means. There's a lot of scholars that I can quote, Foucauldian scholars, Marxian scholars that agree with what I said. So that doesn't mean that you're right. Right. But back to what we were talking about with Donald Trump. I'm just saying that Donald Trump it seems like he's somebody that just has the strength of their convictions. Like, whatever he does, he believes he's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he's just got it behind him. He doesn't care. He just doesn't care.
That he
Like, he's
does
going to do
give
what
a
he's
good
going to do.
example.
He doesn't care what you say about him. He's going to bash you. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And you know what? At a certain point, leadership has to be like that a little bit, because not everybody's going to like when you're making decisions that you feel are right. Not everybody's going to be down with them.
You need
And
some
one
of that.
decision
I
I
think
can think
Trump
of,
might have it in excess, but yeah, but like, he definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you look.
Obama, no question, lacked having enough.
But you know, there was a time where, you know, Obama was just like, I want to get along with everybody, and you know, everybody's going to like me. No, they're not. You know, you don't have to get along with everybody.
It might. I mean, whether he would have got a second term being what would have instantly been categorized as an angry black man, which he was, regardless of the fact that he was unbelievably congenial. Like, would he have gotten a second term? I don't know. Would a lot of liberal or people on the left that stayed home because he disappointed them had come out? Probably. They would.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, how people can still excuse a failure that is the Obama presidency. They can still excuse it, and they can say, well, you know, so much attention was on the free fall. Do you know?
Well, quickly, he was the best black president we've ever had. So that contributes a lot to a lot of the excuses.
I guess you're right.
The best one we've ever had.
But do people understand that the New Deal was passed in FDR's first 100 days, and that he passed like so much legislation in that time trying to tackle the crisis, and the Supreme Court struck down some of this stuff, and he threatened the Supreme Court and pushed them into submission? He had Congress people, you know, basically scared because he told people like, this person's voting against my thing. Call your congressman, get out there to his office. He rallied people to really push and get stuff done. Like, that's what a leader that we need right now. And you know what? He was doing that to save capitalism. He did all that to save capitalism. He was actually able to stand up. So,
and he upset a lot of people too, and a lot of people that were his allies that he made very angry with what he was proposing and what he was pushing.
Yeah, and you know what? It wasn't even enough. You know, there's a lot of liberalism now, that the progressivism that just goes to, you know, kind of, there's a lot of people in the room that kind of want to go back to the New Deal. You know, we want to go back. If the New Deal was really good, if the New Deal really was what we needed, then we wouldn't be going back through this right now, because the New Deal's failure was the inability to make sure that a lot of stuff that they put in place couldn't be taken away. You know, that's actually, you know, a glaring example that, you know, the New Deal is not quite enough.
Yeah, I see that I just noticed in chat that we had Umar who wants us to talk a little bit about solutions. About, like, we know that the Democrats and our system is shot, and I know we talked a little bit at the earlier top of the show about how reaching for the stars is part of it, but we got about a little under 10 or about 10 minutes, give or take, to go.
About 17 minutes, and I would say the number one thing you have to do: drop the Democratic Party. You need to be going and examining the Greens and the Progressive Independent Party. Whatever is out there, even if you want to just stay independent and get involved in activism and running your own candidates, that's what you need to be doing. If there's a Democrat there and they're not down with these policies, if they're not at least down with Bernie Sanders, and I say at least because that's a very low bar. That's not a high bar. It's a low bar. If they're not at least down with Bernie Sanders, you can't support them. And you know what? It may take 5, it may take 6, it may take 10 years for it to really to bear fruit. But that's how long it's going to take. Anything that's worth doing is going to take time, and it's going to be difficult. And I can tell you right now, anybody that's telling you a short-term solution or saying this is something for the short term, they're lying to you, because it's not going to work. This is a problem. These problems have been festering for decades, and you can't just snap your fingers and in 2 years expect to have them solved. 2 years expect to have any type of decent progress really made on them, right? Like, we didn't just get here overnight, and we're not going to be able to dig ourselves out in 2 to 4 years. You know, this is going to be a decades-long process.
Yeah, and Umar continued to say, like, how do we make it unsuck? And I think you addressed that a lot. And I think to your point about it not being a 2 or 4 year long process, and to the idea of bringing solutions, I think one of the big things that it's going to take is a revolution in civics education at the local level, which means that if you're wondering what you can do, is you can make sure that your local school, the closest one to you, at least one in the closest district, has an extreme and is improving their civics education program and is getting volunteers involved and is doing things that are actually going to make generational differences when it comes to at least having a competent and capable voter base, so that if you're making the right points, if you're bringing the right policies, that you're not losing to someone with better messaging and more charisma. That's going to be key in the future, is that if you don't have a discerning group of voters capable of identifying whether what they're being sold is what they're going to get, then it doesn't matter if you're trying to sell them the right thing, because they're not going to be able to accept it over the thing that looks shinier and newer and better.
And guess what? We also have to start exercising more control over our supposed leaders. We shouldn't have them out there, holding hands with Clintonites and neoliberals. They shouldn't be out there sitting on boards for charter schools. They shouldn't be out there, taking these votes, to support, rapid corporate nonsense that makes a whole bunch of money for corporations, like the Congressional Black Caucus, running to help the banks secure money after this and that. Their constituents didn't want them to do that. That's just something that they're out there doing. Now, let's say we talk about the Justice Democrats. I generally, because you're wearing the name of Democrat, and I know that just carrying the name of D, carrying that D next to your name has a price. And that price means you have to be down with what they're down with when they say you got to be down with it. And what I'm saying is, if you're going to do like the Justice Democrat thing, are they willing to say, no, you can kick me out of the party? I'm not going to be down with that. Are they really willing to do that? And are they willing to embarrass other members of the party that are down with those policies? Are they willing to do that? Bernie Sanders wasn't willing to do it. He's the bastion of progressivism, apparently.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy for folks to do that and still think that they're going to have a chance of winning without a base of folks that are out there in the streets. Like, for instance, the neoliberalism, the whitewashed feminism, all of that, it got millions of people out in the streets and taking pictures with cops and all that stuff. Is the more radical version, are they going to get millions in the streets, or is it going to be a few dozen anarchists mixed into some other protest?
See, look, that's a weakness of the left. I hate that every time.
And when I say anarchists, I'm sorry, I don't mean I'm speaking from a more colloquial term of anarchy, not from the specific political sense. But go ahead.
No, I'm saying, every time the left tries to do something, we get painted with the anarchists. Yes, there are some anarchists out there, and not every anarchist is out there throwing Molotovs and trying to burn shit down. There are anarchists that actually have a principled viewpoint that makes sense if you really take the time to understand, what they're looking at and kind of how it relates to where we are, right? But look, a lot of times we have to recognize something that we're also fighting against. We're fighting against, social control. Like, resistance to Trump right now, that's a social thing. They're not resisting Trump's policies. They're just resisting because it's got Trump's name next to it. Half of the stuff he's doing, really, he hasn't even been president that long. Half of that stuff he's doing right now, or most of the stuff that's going on right now, that was still in play before Barack Obama left office. Yet Barack Obama is beloved and Trump is hated. Half of that stuff is not really, a solution-based or policy-based dislike. I dislike Trump because of his policies.
I've just been waiting for
not because I have something personal to say about him.
I've just been waiting for the whole, what's been going on at the Dakota Access Pipeline with the water protectors, for that to turn into Trump's fascist America, even though the same stuff was happening under Obama and the same people were paying little or no attention to it. And that's I think is how I think this is going to look in the future going forward, is that all of the NSA and security state, all the things that Democrats say that they fought for but ignored while they got worse under Obama, are going to suddenly come back, and we're supposed to believe that they're sincere in their attempts to resist these things, when we know not only are they probably insincere, but they're going to fail even if they are sincere in stopping it, as we've seen so far and what Trump's been trying to accomplish, and their inability to stop him, with not even be able to stop or to be able to stay unified against particular nominees, even the ones that are unquestionably unqualified, brings to light that they're not going to be able to resist things that are more that are harder to resist. Where if we remember, Republicans filibustered things that they were going to take hits for filibustering back in their home states because they were united as a front, whereas Democrats aren't. The policies and the ideas aren't that united in order to even be able to do that, particularly when you look at some of the blue dog or energy Democrats or the variety of Democrats that are deep in the establishment and were heavy supporters of Hillary Clinton.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to start talking about now. You know, this whole idea that Justice Democrats is some kind of new thing and all that. Look, if you're invested in the Democratic Party and you just want to keep on doing the same thing that's been going on for well over 60 years, be my guest. Go ahead, more power to you. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's wholly a waste of time, because until they start showing me that they're ready to actually reject the Democratic Party. Let's say they lose the primary. Let's say they get primaried out of it, or they say they get cheated out of it, or whatever happened. They just lose. Are they still going to vote for the Democrat versus the Republican or not? What are they going to do? Are they going to vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? They're going to vote for Hillary Clinton, and that is why they're worthless.
I would push back on them being worthless. I think the value of the Justice Democrats is, if you look at the platform, the rough platform that they put forward, while I find it personally severely lacking in things like social justice and racial equality and even some aspects of income inequality that I think should be more at their forefront, it's the type of message that would appeal to a large group of people. It would appeal to the Women's March group. It would appeal to the working white class in the middle, and it would appeal to these people. It can win. It can win.
Well, here's what I say
now, and I think that is an attractive option for people familiar with the American political game. Is winning is a pretty important aspect as far as getting what you want. It doesn't mean that you're going to get what you want, but if you don't win, you're almost guaranteed not to get what you want.
Okay, so number one, no, I think we've seen with Barack Obama that even winning doesn't mean you're going to get what you want, right?
Yeah.
Like I think we've already seen that. We need the right coalition to win, right? And when you talk about this women's march, like I hate to be like this, but basically we have a very elite form of feminism. You know, really the feminists that form of feminism shouldn't even be counted as like some sort of ally or some sort of coalition that we can rally around, because they were okay seeing black people get put in jail. You know, they were okay with that. You know, the LGBT community was perfectly fine with all those people getting kicked off of welfare. You know, they were perfectly fine with food stamps being cut, as long as, and it's not to hate on those specific groups. I'm just saying, the coalition, politics is an exchange, and for it to maintain being a coalition, everybody has to put in. And so far, a lot of the groups on the more elite end, they aren't putting in. They're perfectly fine with the neoliberals, and everybody else isn't. And so that's why, that can't be a strategy moving forward. Now, with the Justice Democrats, the reason why I'm saying, are they going to fold in with neoliberalism if they lose, and that's what makes them worthless, is because in order to exercise control over the Democratic Party, in order to really actually start moving them in your direction, you have to be willing to say no. You have to be willing to say no. And if you're not willing to say no, then, they're just going to whoop you. And then they're going to make you kiss the ring, and they're not going to give you anything, and the cycle continues. Just like the last 60 years. Congratulations. Great Justice Democrats.
But, I mean, Justice Democrats could be what we make them. I mean, I'm not familiar with exactly who's behind currently the Justice Democrats, but if we make the Justice Democrats a tag that you have to meet a certain level of expectations, it may be Democrat light towards progressivism, versus the Democrats themselves as the party that we know them now, the neoliberal corporatist agenda pushing side that we know now. It could be two factions of the Democratic Party, and while the Justice Dems may not be perfect, they may still be a faction for progressive politics within the Democratic Party, moving the party towards the left and or opening the opportunity for a cleaving of the party and an actual progressive party being formed. Or here's the problem. Here's the problem. Neoliberals getting kicked out.
Number one, I didn't say white feminism. I said elite feminism, because this form of feminism is not racially bound. And I'm responding to a comment here. Mm-hmm. So here's also what I'm going to say. Unless you're willing to say no to the neoliberal, you're not splitting anything. So as long as you're saying yes to the neoliberalism, you're folding right on in. You're going to be under that heel of neoliberalism your whole time. You can complain about it. You know, you can carry their water, and when they say, "Oh, bring me some water," you gonna grumble, "I don't want to bring you any water." They gonna say, "What?" And you gonna say, you know, put your head down. You're not gonna say anything. You'll keep bringing them their water. That's basically what they're gonna do. You know, and that's BS, and that's not gonna go anywhere. You know, they're gonna assimilate into some sort of dominant structure where the Hillary Clintons and the Cory Bookers and the Nancy Pelosi's are gonna whip them, and they're gonna basically do everything that they say because they want to stay a part of the coalition. When you're ready to say no, that's when you have power. As long as you're trying to get along, go along to get along, you're not going anywhere. And I just don't understand how after so many years people haven't learned that already. So, you know, we got the New Deal because people were willing to say no.
If Justice
That's what made them scared of you.
If Justice Democrats were willing to say no, then you would consider that they may be of more use than you're giving them credit for now at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, if they're willing to say no and then go and make coalitions with like outside parties, Democratic Socialists of America, Labor, and the Green Party, then yes, they would be a force to be reckoned with, and they could actually be very effective if they were doing that. So far, that doesn't look like what they're doing. So as it stands right now, you know, they have to prove themselves before I change my opinion. But as of right now, no.
All right, and Dave Backroom, just let us know. We do get off a little bit early in order to give them time to get the channel set up for Ben's show, so we're going to just wrap up. I just wanted to say some parting words. I want to thank Nick for joining us on the Project Sanity and standing in for Brandon. Did a great job, and make sure to check out the Takedown with Nick. He just started up his own YouTube channel as well, so make sure to find that and follow him on his Twitter account. You can see it there on screen now. At the Takedown Nick. And also, if you're watching on the Benjamin Dixon Show channel, make sure to check out and subscribe to the Project Sanity channel. We recently, I did a production for the Washington State Democratic Party chair debate. And so it was a debate between the people trying to be the chair of the Washington State Party. So if you're interested in finding out more about what that looks like at the local level, what's happening within the Democratic Party, you can check that out. It's right there on the homepage, and I'll pass it off to Nick there.
I'm just gonna say, you know, I'm sorry if I'm too radical for the people that are in the Bernie Sanders coalition, but right now, you know, we're in desperate times, and it's gonna call for desperate measures. And like trying to half-ass it this late in the game, you know, Bernie Sanders probably would have, you know, where he is now, that probably was good 40 years ago, and we could have worked from there. But you know, we're kind of behind the 8 ball now on a lot of issues, and it's really not. You can't half-ass it at this point. And you can say, you know, you can be the smartest man in the room without bodies and all that. But if you build it, they will come. You just got to show them. You just got to be that beacon of light. You just got to be out there. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks.